Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the very first episode of season 2 of The Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions and the people behind them. My name is Nicholas Zard. I am your host for this show, and I've decided to invite someone I deeply admire and respect in the industry, the advanced air mobility industry, but mostly aviation industry, and somebody who's been here from the get-go, and somebody who's helped me shape my professional decision making in innovative mobility solutions for a long time, Rex Alexander. So we're not going to go into any kind of introductions. You should know who he is by now. His handle is Mr. Infrastructure, and he really deserves that. For decades he has been Mr. Introduction, and that's also why I'm wearing this hat, because he is very famous for wearing this hat or that type of hat throughout all of his public speaking. So today we really go deep down in the weeds. We talk about what has happened in 2025. We're not naming details, but the gist of what has happened in 2025. Also, the very big changes at our government level here in the United States, the new administration, and how also the repercussions of that change have shut down a lot of talks that we have had in the industry between policymakers, the regulators, and of course the stakeholders. And so back in July of last year, 2025, Duffy came out and said, we are open to talking again. We want the FAA to talk. We want the DOT to talk. And so, of course, we sent out the invitation to, once again, let's start talking, because we were supposed to have a lot of people from the FAA come over here and talk about what the FAA is doing, and also to hear what you have to say. Hence, again, please like and subscribe. That helps us a lot to continue providing you with good quality information, and of course free. And for those who would like to buy us a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, in my case, please let us know if you would be interested in sponsoring any of our podcast sessions. That would be fantastic. We were very lucky to have a very first sponsor last year, back in July, and that is Aero Auto Global. So we're always looking for more people. I mean, after all, we got to pay for the microphones, the computers, and all that good stuff, and that just helps us to continue providing all this information to you. Without further ado, let's just jump into what Rex has to say. And there is a lot to say, by the way. So hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you next week with another important person too. Thank you. We're alive. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode, the first episode in 2026 of The Ways We Move. And who better to kick it off than with Rex Alexander right here. And as you'll notice, we're both sporting hats, because this is really Rex's signature, right? I'll go even further. Guess what I have? I still have it here,
you still got
right
the coin.
next to
Good man.
I have it right here.
We came up with a new motto last year when we were at the AAM Masterclass. It's fear the beard, respect the hat.
That's right. I love it. I love it. The place where we heard exactly. I'm going to take it off because this unfortunately does not fit my head yet. I'm going to make it fit one day. But this is the place where we heard only sober people here, no cheerleaders. And I have to tell you, Rex, that's the best thing I've ever heard in my entire professional life, especially in advanced air mobility.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to welcome you back again. We're not going to do an introduction. I think people should know who you are. If they don't know, well, sorry, you got to get out from under that rock.
I'm everywhere. You can find me. Google me.
Exactly. Alias Mr. Infrastructure, a title that he has well deserved over the decades. And I'm Nicholas Zard. I'm usually your host. Today we're having Rex back again, because we're going to talk about what happened last year in 2025. It was jam-packed 2025. I don't even know where to start, where to end, but we can probably glean a few things from that, and then we'll move forward into what do we have to look forward to when it comes to 2026. So, Rex, I'm going to give you a little exercise. Where do you want to start with 2025?
Oh, wow.
Too many things happen.
I think there's a lot of great things that happened in 2025. Yeah. I know one of the things the Vertical Flight Society did, we stood up a focus group for infrastructure to be a sounding board for the FAA. And we were fortunate to work very closely with our friends in the FAA and provide them with a significant number of recommendations on the current heliport design advisory circular, as well as the Vertiport engineering brief that they have since taken and addressed and put into the next iteration. So the relationship there has been good. The working with all the different industry groups through VFS has been fantastic. We had some fantastic meetings. The VAI, Vertical Aviation International, we had the symposium for infrastructure for that. We had VFS had a great forum. VFS in May of last year, we talked significantly about downwash and outwash. And we brought a lot of major players to the table to have that conversation, to include my good friend Richard Brown from the UK, Marilyn Smith from, help me out, what?
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
And they brought a huge contingent of people in and had some great discussions. So that's ongoing. We're working on a reporting system for downwash incidents. Is something we've never had before. Good. So that came out of that meeting. We had Oshkosh. Oshkosh was a big success, covered a lot of things. Oshkosh had the big release of Mosaic, which was,
that's right,
15, 20 years in the making, took forever to get across the finish line, but they finally did. And then I think with that, business on the traditional helicopter market has really taken off, where we've seen kind of a cooling off in the vertical lift advanced air mobility infrastructure market. So it's interesting to see the dynamics of how that's playing out. I think a lot of people are looking at the business model and saying, well, if I don't have an aircraft yet, well, how am I going to make money if I build something today? So we see kind of that die down. I expect once we see an aircraft hit that certification marker, we're going to see a resurgence. So when that happens, the people in Las Vegas know better than I do. But I think looking back, 2025 was very productive, but I think it could have been much more productive. One of the issues we ran into was collaborating with our friends in government. So there were several opportunities. VAI, Vertical Aviation International, Verticon, Vertical Flight Societies Forum, Oshkosh with EAA. And during those events, in the past, we have a lot of government input and a lot of government participation. And that's where industry is. They're at those events. Problem is, in 2025, leadership in the FAA, leadership in the NASA, leadership in the Department of Transportation, the Department of Defense, basically restricted any of their subject matter experts from participating. Now, they had people show up, but they were managers that really just don't have the depth of knowledge to have some of the discussions that need to be had. So we went, and I was involved in several situations with VAI and VFS where we invited people, up to 6 months in advance. And we did not get anything back until like the week before. I even invited one of the board members from the NTSB, and they called a week prior, said, hey, I'm sorry, we have to cancel. We've been told we can't participate. So one of the things that came out in 2025 that I would point to, and I would point this out to all our friends in government, in the FAA, the DOT, NASA, DOD, is this administration, specifically when they announced Mosaic in Oshkosh this summer in July, Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy specifically said, and I quoted him in an article I wrote for Don Zoldi, that, hey, the FAA and the DOT aren't the one that come up with the good ideas. It's industry. And industry is here, meaning they're at Oshkosh, i.e., we need to be here. And that's one of the messages that I've been working on, trying to get across to all the people in government. Hey, we have all these events, we have these workshops, we have these forums that industry's there, and they're working really, really hard to come up with a blueprint for the next 30 years for a safe, compliant, business savvy transportation model. We have to have participation from our government friends. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we see in 2025 that, or 2026, more engagement, and not from the managers, but from the subject matter experts that are in those fields that
Exactly.
we need to sit down and actually hammer out what this blueprint looks like. We have
I,
Vertical Flight Society has transformative vertical flight event
yes.
coming up in San Jose, California, into January. I'm hoping we'll see a lot of people from NASA. It's in their
We
backyard.
It has to happen. Ames is right around the corner.
And then VAI, Vertical Aviation International, is having Verticon in Atlanta, Georgia, the beginning of March. We're doing a huge symposium on that Monday on infrastructure. We've invited numerous FAA players to come and have discussions, yet to be seen if they get allowed to come. And I've talked to several, and
And
they want to come. It's just that their
yes,
leadership won't
see,
let them come. So
that's an important point to make, and I think also to frame it for those who might not be aware, or even our international readers and listeners and watchers, that and again, I should preface by saying we're not taking sides, right? This
no,
has nothing to do with it.
we're trying to make
but
the best situation
yeah, the
possible.
best situation for aviation, for the future of aviation. But it's true, when the new administration came in, a lot of change happened, and a lot of change went down all the way up to NASA, to the FAA, to the DOT, and all of a sudden, all these people who were invited and were always coming to talk to us, interface with us, all of a sudden didn't know what to do. They had mixed directives, and in the end, their top leaders said, "No, you're not going anywhere." So we were supposed to have on this podcast so many people from the FAA explaining what they were doing, explaining what was going on, and within a month, everything changed. And we've seen that all throughout the year. But you're right, there's something that was odd, and we did see a little bit of relaxing around after, maybe like around September, August, September, after Secretary Duffy said, we need to engage, we need to be more open, and everything. But there's still a little bit of a lag, and of course we can always attribute that, in aviation things move slowly, but we need to see much more of that. And today, I still don't have the response I'd love to have from the FAA, from the DOT, from NASA.
No, I know it's a challenge. There's bureaucracy and politics at play, no matter what the landscape is. I know in
Absolutely.
the forum we had for last year in May for Vertical Flight Society, the leadership of VFS said that there was approximately 200 people that did not come, who would have normally been there to present white papers on research projects. There was one particular individual, I felt sorry for him, from the Department of Defense, who basically came on his own dime, under his own name, without any, and actually got heavily chastised by the DoD for participating. I mean, he was in Dutch with the DoD. And we've seen that in a couple of places where people say, well, it's important. We're doing research on safety. We want to be there and have this discussion and see what direction we need to move, and also what makes the most sense for federal dollars from a research standpoint. That's the discussions that are held at these locations. And without the FAA and NASA being there, the other group that had a major shot, and this is kind of a pocketbook thing. When you have 200 people not show up that you were kind of expecting, that kind of hurts the bottom line. AIAA had a huge gap sucking chest wound because no one from NASA came. And
Absolutely.
it's like,
and that's the gist. That's the bulk of what they do too, by the way, too.
Oh, yeah. So hopefully, fingers crossed, 2026,
Yeah.
we'll see better engagement and more subject matter expertise in that engagement.
And it should be. I mean, that is the message we're hearing. That is, we started, by the way, seeing more and more FAA people coming back. But you're right. There were managers. There were not people who were able to come on the stage and talk very freely. But we started to see them coming back. We certainly hope that they will come back much more and on force, and sit down and talk and engage, because that was exactly what we were talking about a year ago, a little over a year ago, is the FAA wanted people to understand what they were doing, that they were open to the conversation, that they were doing things, and they wanted to explain. And after that, we went into this sort of winter. But now, things are defrosting. Let's get going again.
Oh yeah, no, I totally embrace government being involved. I want to invite them and have them there. So we're sending out invitations right now for VAI in March in Atlanta. So hopefully we'll see some improvement. I'm optimistic.
Hey, and you know what? I'm in Savannah. I'm only 4 hours away from it, so I will help in whatever capacity I can. That's for sure.
I appreciate that. 2025 was good. I think it was kind of a slowdown in the advanced air mobility infrastructure side a little bit.
Yes.
I was probably, I would say 3 years ago, 50% of the business was R&D and AAM. Today, it may
Yep.
be 10%. Everything else is
Yep.
traditional helicopters, which has taken off, which is great. Um, I don't know what 2026 holds. I have seen a lot of organizations, companies popping up that are, quote, infrastructure experts. Some are
Yes.
exactly that. They are good. They know what they're talking about. They have the chops. They have the street cred. Then there's a few that, you know what, just because you can spell AAM doesn't mean you're an expert in AAM. So
Well said.
what I tell my clients that are in this industry, I said, do your homework. Anybody you're going to partner with, vet
Yes.
them thoroughly. What's their background? What their experience? What kind of
Yes.
subject matter
Yes.
expertise do they have on their team?
Yes.
If you look at a company and it's got 10 people and all 10 are business and marketing, maybe not.
Maybe a red flag there along the
Maybe a
way.
red
I
flag,
think.
but I think also when we look at AAM as a specific, and our good friend Clint Harper and I had this discussion not too long ago, is when we look at 2025 and AAM infrastructure, we see the industry as a whole have gotten a little tired of it. They've gotten oversaturated with
Yes.
all these meetings and everybody have, oh, we're going to do this, or we're going to do this. And a lot of times it's the same talking heads saying the same things, just in different locations for
Absolutely.
higher prices. So I think there's an opportunity for our industry that's looking at advanced air mobility from an infrastructure standpoint to step up their game in
Shameless
2026.
shameless segue, but you are actually calling it. That's why we came up with the AAM masterclass. And if you remember
Yeah,
years ago, we were having that same conversation. We're bored.
it's industry
I love all these
fatigue.
guys,
Yeah,
but
people
it's
get
industry fatigue.
fatigue, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to spend $900, $1,200 plus travel to come and
No. Yes.
what are
For
you going to
what?
give me when I walk away?
Yes.
What's in my hands tangible other than
Well,
a bunch of swag and some cool
yeah.
printed
And
pamphlets?
worse yet, which I'm sure you've also felt that is, oh, and by the way, you want me to pay to speak, to give you my 20 years of experience
Oh
to
yeah.
people who are paying you? Oh, come on, guys. Let's stop with that. And that's why we came up with the AM Masterclass, where we had a more rational outlook. And what do we teach them from the academia, from the research part of it?
Mm-hmm.
Hence Marilyn's amazing work on downwash and outwash. And then in practicality, what does it look like? And those videos that you showed us were absolutely mind blowing, because now I understand the theoretical part and the actual part of it. And of course, the workshop helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something that's really interesting, and I want to highlight that. You're right. There are new infrastructure companies, and I've found that even the old ones are not talking as much as they used to. Again, there was a burnout, and these new companies, you're right. There's some good ones in there, and they're solid, and then there are the others. And I look at their drawings, and I'm thinking, have you watched Rex's videos? That's not gonna work. This is dangerous. You're gonna kill people.
I
This is
know. It's having been a helicopter pilot and flown in those environments, especially in urban environments, there's certain things you just don't do. And the FAA has
yeah,
some really good research papers that talk about some of this stuff. One of the things we talk about a lot is turbulence on infrastructure. So you have architectural turbulence. The last thing you want to do is have a building and put the pad below the roof line on the side of the building. That is not thing you want to do. Also, if you're going to put a pad on top of a rooftop, you want an air gap. Most of them I
yes,
see out there are AI generated
yes,
crap. There are some out there I look at and I said, these guys have got it figured out. They're doing the right thing for the right reasons.
yes.
Now, one of the questions I've asked this to other people is like, there are a number of people in the helicopter industry that build, design, and service heliports. Why aren't more of them in this industry? And it comes down
That
to, well, there's nobody paying any money. And
yeah,
I'm
that's the
making a
problem,
lot of
right?
money over here. Why would I move into this until that's a thing? So we're seeing all these people that are popping
Yeah,
up that have no experience in either.
which is really weird, because if you think about advanced air mobility, especially EB-105 and everything, it heavily relies on the helicopter industry, on the helicopter infrastructure and everything. Why haven't they made it? Is
Mm-hmm.
indeed that was the problem up until this past year. Is where is the business sense? And again, this also goes back to, remember how back then we only looked at the eVTOL companies. We only talked about vertiports until we realized you can't make money on only eVTOLs and vertiports, and hence now talking about multi-ports, drone ports, and really a way to just mesh all of this traffic together: drones, eVTOLs, eSTOLs, eCTOLs, regular airplanes, regular helicopters. Now you're talking sense. Now I can have a business model around that. Let's not get into the energy side of the equation. We'll get to that later. I'm writing an article on small nuclear reactors right now because I don't know how else we're going to do that. But you're right. I think now
well, I think the other piece of the puzzle looking into the crystal ball for 2026 is we've seen this exponential growth in technology. The one thing we haven't seen keep up, and we never do, is the policy. I'm
absolutely
working on an article for Dawn right now that speaks to the use case. And one of the things I'd given a lecture to NASA Ames a couple of years ago, and I could see everybody's eyes kind of like, holy cow, didn't know that. So in the United States, there's two use cases. There's public use and private use. It can be publicly owned or privately owned, but the use case is the one we're interested in because
absolutely,
the FAA has oversight for public use, but they don't have oversight authority for private use. So then it's left up to the state and municipality. Also, when all these different organizations, the OEMs, Part 135 certificate holders, and the people that want to build this infrastructure want to build it, there's a couple pieces that policy that haven't been figured out yet. And one is, if it's private use, who has what oversight and to what level and what authority will they have? And as a person in the public, Joe Public, who's taking this as a public transportation model, what should their expectations be that what you built meets some standard? So there was an article, or there was legislation passed in Florida, went on the books July the 1st. It hasn't been enacted yet, but they actually identified a third case. And they have public, they have private, but now they have private use with public interest.
Yeah.
And that's basically anybody on board's paying client, that's public interest. And they've stepped up the bar for oversight for the state DOT. The question then becomes, can we use that as a carrot to industry and government? If I look at federal funds, only those airports that are public use and only those airports that are public use that are in the NIPIUS as a reliever airport have access to any federal AIP funding. There's only 53 public use heliports. Only 9 of those are listed in the NIPIUS, and only 3 have ever gotten AIP funding. Now, what if we had another category? And it's like, we talk about AIP funding for airports all the time. It's like, I see that release every year. Oh, we gave $52 million. So we give, $52 billion over the AIP funding lifetime. And I'm like, what about the vertical flight people? Show us a little love for an airport that gets, let's say, $10 million for a total runway refurb and a bunch of other stuff. I can build a heliport or a vertiport today for under $250,000. Give me $10 million, I can put in an entire state's transportation system. So I think if we come up with this third category, and I'd like to see it at a federal level in some way, because now we can have an incentive. You meet this standard, you're in this system, we can tap into some type of whatever that may be, federal funding. I think hospitals would benefit hugely if we could improve them, because they're all private use. And
that's true.
When somebody picks you up with American Airlines or United, you get a choice on who you're flying with, when you're flying, what aircraft, what seat you're taking. You get picked up on the street by an EMS helicopter, you usually aren't conscious in a lot of cases, and you have zero choice. And most people don't realize that you may be landing at one of the most unsafe locations known to man, and there's nothing you can do about it. So
the local hospital around here has a helipad, and I have to tell you, it's got trees within maybe 100 yards. It's got high voltage lines not too far away. There is a wind socket, but it's in the corner of a building. I mean, everything screams Rex needs to come here and tell them that we can't do that.
We see those all the time. And then a lot of times it's not something that's hard to do, but it's a lot of times it's like regional locations in rural environments don't have the money. This is where this could actually be applied. So if I could get something from Department of Homeland Security or through FEMA or something like that for natural disasters and relief, things like that, it wouldn't be a lot of money for a lot of these small hospitals to, we're not talking a lot. You
No, we're
could
not
make
talking about
such
like
a
we're talking.
huge impact on safety and operations with a whole lot
A
less than what
fraction.
AIP, yeah, a fraction of what AIP puts out.
Yeah.
But
You
but we
also,
have to fix that with policy, and
but policy's got to be
that
there.
starts on Capitol Hill.
And that means more than just talking about it. We have to do it actually. And you said something that was really interesting with heliports. You told me only what 3% of the heliports in the United States were public use. Was that
Actually,
it?
it's
Or
less
am I
than
misquoting?
1%. So there's over
Holy
6,000
moly.
plus heliports that are on record with the FAA. They have a new site that came out 2 years ago. It's called ADIP, ADIP. It stands for Airport Data Information Porthole. It's an access point for the airport master record. So if you're public or private, airport, heliport, balloon port, seaplane base, that's where we put you. And there's a data stream in there, and there's data fields. The challenge with the database is it's for private use specifically. There's no oversight. So there's information that's in there that hasn't been updated or changed for 30 years. There's heliports that are in the
That's
database
right.
that haven't existed for 30 years. We did a study in 2019 with NASA, and we looked at just hospitals, and we estimated there were 2,000 hospital heliports in the United States today that the FAA doesn't have any information on whatsoever. And again, that's because they're private use, and because they're private use, the FAA has no authority. It's up to the state. And even the states, some do, some don't. Depends on what their regulatory and
Hmm.
legislative bodies decide to do. We talked earlier about drone operations, BVLOS. There is a heliport. Not sure I should say which one it is, but it's in Indianapolis, Indiana. It is an interesting one because there is a company, a corporation that actually owns the heliport. So there's that party. Then there's the hospital that utilizes the heliport. So that's a third party or a second party. Then you have the Part
Whoa.
135 certificate holders who operate in and out of it. So there's a third party. Now,
Whoa.
that particular
Whoa.
heliport actually has an instrument procedure attached to it. So you have an IFR instrument flight rules approach and departure to that location. Now, one thing that's never supposed to happen is an airport or heliport that has instrument procedures attached to it should always be in the airport master record database, and it should have a
Mm.
location identifier.
Of course.
By accident, I found this particular location didn't have an identifier and wasn't in the airport master record. So if let's say you're a drone operator and you're flying through that area, there is nothing to tell you that there is a heliport there, let alone it's an IFR heliport. So imagine in your mind, you're doing drone delivery systems through this area. You have no idea this
Hmm.
exists.
Exactly.
Pilot's flying in IFR conditions, and he's shooting the approach, and he's breaking out at maybe 350 feet. And drones are allowed to fly up to 400 feet, not in the clouds, hopefully, but there's not a lot of room for error there. So when we look at if something like that were to occur, it would be catastrophic potentially. But the other side of the coin is the complacency on so many different
Levels.
levels would open up a lawsuit that you could not imagine. And I would
So,
be interested to see a legal standpoint on could we sue the
yeah.
federal government because of a
You,
lack of oversight.
yeah, and it's funny you should say that because I think that a lot of things actually happen like that. We wait until accidents happen. We wait until
Oh, yeah.
lawsuits
We
happen,
always
and
say
then we finally get moving.
all
But not too long ago,
regulations are
you're
written in
right.
blood.
Yeah, well, and yeah, very good point. Good point there. But not too long ago, an aircraft, I can't remember if it was American Airlines or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
struck a drone, and you could see the damage on that thing. That was
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
bad.
I
So,
mean, you have a
where
pretty
are the
good closure
regulations for
rate. It's
that?
going
And
to
of
do
course, there are
damage.
some.
Yeah.
It's going
So
to do
I think
damage,
there's,
especially at that velocity.
we look at that BB loss, and we look at some of the latest things that have come out and asking for input. One of the areas that I did a research paper with our good friend Cliff Johnson over at the FAA at the technical center there in Atlantic City, we did a deep dive in the data and the database and published a paper through Vertical Flight Society on where the gaps were, gave it to the FAA and said, okay, here's some of the problems. One, our accountability is terrible. The accuracy level is terrible. There are things that are highly airport centric, but have nothing to do with heliports. So when you look at the data and the data fields, it asks you the questions like, what's the runway length and width? It doesn't say what's the touchdown liftoff areas, the FADO area, and the safety area size. It just says what's the runway length and width. Now, when you look at a runway in the United States, if you weren't to an airport and you knew that the runway was 3618, you would probably come to a pretty quick realization, well, the approach path is probably 18 and 36. Now, if you look at the database and you look at airports, it says 1836. You look at heliport, it just has the letter H. We have never tracked approach departure paths in the United States for heliports.
Why is that?
Who knows? It's one of those monster gaps, and that's where we get into this BV loss piece. Is, well, where should I tell the drone and UAS not to fly? Well, I don't have any approach departure paths to map out, so I'm going to just have to say that anywhere within a 1.5 nautical miles, stay away. Well, that's hard.
Yeah,
that's hard.
Yeah. Could this be because they think that helicopters are much more mobile? I mean, an airplane, it would take a long time to divert, whereas a helicopter could theoretically do a 45 and just go in a different direction. Is that their thinking behind?
I hope not. I hope not, because that's a false sense of thinking. Because
it's scary.
You have a closure rate coming in, and anything that's below your level is going to blend into the background. If it's above you and above the horizon, you're going to pick it up pretty easy. But if it's below you, it's going to masked by the clutter. And it's kind of a scary situation. It's not a matter. I hate to say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we do something bad.
It's going to happen. Yeah.
But on the whole BV loss drone port thing, I think there's an opportunity for our industry to fix some of these gaps and make it, safe and profitable.
Can you bring us up to date with BV loss? A lot has happened last year. There was a lot of movement going forward. Can you capture the essence of what has happened? Because there's a lot of celebration, but there was a lot of questions too. Can you tell us?
I don't know what the FAA is thinking. I know when they had the opportunity for public response and public input, there was a lot, and I would say 80% of it was not positive. I know in looking at what other people had posted, and I'd worked closely with several of the different major associations. I know GAMA, General Aircraft Manufacturers Association, VAI, Vertical Aviation, International Vertical Flight Society. We all worked pretty closely in helping each other put something out to the FAA. And I know VAI put some really good stuff forward. It wasn't that we were against it. It was just that they weren't taking into consideration a lot of very important things. One was, right away. It's like, who has a right away, the drone or an aircraft with people in it? And if you read between the lines, it was the drone that had the right away. And we're like, no.
But the maritime world is very clear with that one, right? I mean, I just took my boating license, and the heavier ones usually has the right of way. It's harder for a bigger boat to move than.
But I see a big push inside of Capitol Hill from some of the manufacturers and some of the major drone companies to do things that maybe we would shy away from and not do because of a safety factor. So I'm hoping looking forward, there's that one document that's out right now for public input asking about environmental impacts and it drives me insane that the FAA refuses to call it a drone port. They came up with, it's a hub. That's totally opposite from the taxonomy that we're using in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's a drone port. But at the same time, they use the term hub throughout this document that you're giving input back on. It's all about the environment, and nowhere in there really is the word safety used, and the word heliport doesn't appear once. The question then becomes, what's the standard that these hubs, or whatever you want to call them, have to meet, and how are they being charted in the National Airspace System so that we know where they're at. There's a location at Walmart. There is Louisville. I remember seeing it. Somebody brought it to my attention. I looked at it, and there's a full-blown drone operation for delivery out of their parking lot.
Right.
3,000 feet down the street is a heliport for a hospital. Now, the question then is what are you doing to chart that? What are you doing from a warning or an alert system? Based on what I know is pretty much zero. When we look at airspace, and this goes back to what I talked about in tracking what is the airspace at a heliport. We don't know. We have no clue. Well, how do you protect airspace that you don't have?
How do you protect that?
Yeah. So when you look at what they have in this situation, you have a drone taking off from this location that as soon as it hits 400 feet, it is already in the approach departure airspace. Now, if you use FAA's language on what is an obstruction and a hazard, it's pretty clear this would be considered a hazard to flight. However, since it's a drone, we look the other way. And that's one of the questions I've had with the FAA as well as Congress is, what are we doing here? We're going to hurt people. We need to fix this.
We're going to hurt people.
I said,
back to the whole.
And don't get me wrong, I am 100% behind the AAM drone UAS market. It's
of course,
we need to do it correctly.
But we got to do it the way everything is done in aviation: safety first, safety first, safety first. And bringing on board the stakeholders, the ones who really understand what's going on. And again, this goes back to, yes, we're waiting for another lawsuit. We're waiting for people to get hurt or worse yet, die.
Yeah.
Until we say, well, you know what, this is really not working out. Yes, indeed, it's not working out. But guess what?
And this leads back to our original conversation. We talk about oversight. So the FAA tells you right up front in their advisory circuit for heliports, it's like, well, if it's private use, we, the federal government, can't help you protect your airspace. That's totally up to you. State DOTs rarely protect private use airspace. If it's public use, I did a big expose on Indianapolis downtown heliport, and the city of Indianapolis actually wrote some extremely strong language on public use heliports to protect that airspace, to protect that heliport, because there was money invested. Doesn't apply to anything private. That then becomes, okay, well, if I have a vertiport, we're doing eVTOL operations, who's protecting the airspace? How do I protect the airspace? How do I identify the airspace? And that's where we got back to that private use commercial ops, is maybe there's a bar in there that we can kill two birds with one stone without being overzealous in the regulatory market.
And it also shows how complicated things are and how different we are here in the United States compared to Europe, especially in the way we structured airspace, the way we run it and everything. Whereas over here, you do have a lot of input from states, from municipalities, from all the way up to the federal government, from private industry and everything. Whereas in Europe, it's much more rigid, right? It happens all within one or two entities and it gets trickled down. And I've always wondered, the pros and cons obviously is we're a little bit more loosey-goosey on this side of the Atlantic. They're a little bit too rigid on that side of the Atlantic. Somewhere in the middle, there's got to be
the happy medium, right? Yeah. Well, I know the one group that
I've happy medium, right?
Yeah, one of the groups that I've had the pleasure of working with in the past, and is trying to bring all the sides together. Is NASAO, National Association of State Aviation Officers.
I thought you were going to say ICAO. Yeah, okay.
No, they're still out there a little bit. But NASAO here in the United States, each state has a Department of Transportation. And each Department of Transportation generally has an aviation director. Most of those aviation directors belong to the organization called NASAO. They're one of the smaller groups out there, but they have a very competent staff. Greg Pecoraro is the current CEO, fantastic individual. They're having, I think it's in February coming up here, they have their big Washington, D.C. meeting to talk aviation, budgeting. A lot of what NASAO deals with is that AIP funding for their airports in every state. So it's a major player on Capitol Hill when it comes to the budget. They're a very small group. However, they're a very powerful group. So they actually have an advanced air mobility group working in this space. and paying very close attention to what they're publishing. And they publish some really good stuff so far about advanced air mobility from a policy standpoint. It's like any challenge, if you're in a bureaucratic system, and let's say you're in the state of Indiana and you work at the DOT, I don't have any authority to change policy. I have to get legislators to do that. And that takes time, and you got to convince them to write it. And we see what happened in West Virginia when somebody told some legislators, say, hey, you need to write it this way, so everything in the state of West Virginia must be public use vertiports. And I'm like, we're all sitting there going, no, that's a bad idea, because if I say I'm public use, that means I have to allow anybody in the public to come and go.
Yes.
Well, I can do that at Dallas-Fort Worth International because I got a big area. I can segregate all the GA on one side and all of American United and Delta on the other side. I get this little footprint of a vertiport. I'm coming in. I'm a private pilot. I got 100 hours, and I've just bought my brand new eVTOL. And you're public use. You got to let me come in. Well, I'm going to screw up your business model like nobody's business. So I think
again that
it's that writing policy is important, but how you write it, what you write it. I've worked really closely with Texas and Florida and Indiana and several other states. And okay, what should we say? What should we say? How should we? And I always tell them there's two specific lines of legislation every state and every municipality should have on the books. Your heliport or vertiport is contingent on the FAA providing a favorable airspace determination. A lot of people don't know it, but say you build a heliport and you called the FAA and they came out and looked at it and they're like, we don't know what you were drinking last night, but this is the most unsafe thing we've ever seen in our life. Now, the key here is the FAA has no authority to deny you a location identifier and put you in the system. If they say it's unsafe, and that's one of the problems in the regulatory issue, is when you look up what objectionable means in the Code of Federal Regulations, it doesn't say what it means. It just says the FAA will tell you why. It doesn't say what it means. If you go to the FAA policy that the FAA uses, it basically stipulates unsafe for people on the ground and persons in the air. Now, having looked at all the data, there are about 135 facilities in the United States, airports and heliports, that are listed as objectionable. 53, if I remember right, 53 heliports had objectionable airspace determinations. 42 of those were hospitals. And I landed at one time, and I'm like, who in their right mind signed off on this? Well, nobody did. I actually looked at the airspace determination letter, and the FAA said, unsafe. But there was nothing the FAA could do. So that's one of those things. So if you're a municipality or a state and you put that one line in there that you have to have a favorable airspace determination, you've just taken a significant amount of leverage for the state on the positive for safety, because you now it makes FAA criteria regulatory. When the FAA can't enforce it, now the state can. Same with the municipality. There's also conditional. You have objectionable, you have concur, but you have this one that's called conditional. Conditional means, hey, we like what we see, but here's some recommendations. However, in the FAA, that airspace determination letter, you get to have the conditions like mark that light, or mark that tower, take down that tree, mark that fence, put lights in if you're doing night off. There is no follow-up to any of that from the FAA side.
Are you kidding me?
Now, in the code, and that's the fun part, is it really only applies to public. If you look in the Code of Federal Regulations, it says very clearly those conditions must remain in place for the longevity of the facility. Now, on the private side, there's no checks and balances. So that's the other thing I tell municipalities and states. I said, if you get a conditional, you should call out that language specifically and say, all conditions shall be maintained in accordance with the FAA for the longevity of the facility. I said, with 2 lines of code, you have improved your airspace safety in your state 100-fold.
Exponentially. So it just seems like we have all the pieces. They might be moving, but we have all the pieces, and we just need some sort of unifying, gluing, bonding it all together thing. Do you think it is happening right now within, the FAA DOT, or at least it seems like the will is there? The speeches certainly seem to point in that direction, but you and I know there's a lot of things that need to articulate below just the talking about it. Do you think it is moving? And this is
I
where
think
we're going into the
it's
2026.
slowly manifesting in the right direction. It's not happening really
Yeah.
quickly. The key, I think,
Yeah.
is I always tell people all the time, it's like I can make a decision, but my decision may put you out of business. It may actually create an unsafe condition for the next guy. I said, when we make these decisions, we need to make sure we have the right people at the table. And we need to make sure those subject matter experts there. We'll go back to the original discussion. I have to have the FAA subject matter expertise sitting at the table.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is how many different lines of business within the FAA do I need at that table? And sometimes we're talking 10, 12, 13 lines of business.
Exactly.
You
How
try
does that
getting
work?
13 different lines of
Yeah,
business to sit down at the
absolutely.
table. That is a challenge. We
Absolutely.
did it effectively with the U.S. helicopter safety team in Washington, D.C. for several years, but it took a year to plan the meeting just because we had to go through all those hoops to get everybody identified, number one, but get permission for them to attend.
And I think it's also important for those who may or may not know about it. The FAA, and we love the FAA. We definitely support the
Mhm.
FAA, but it's a very siloed agency,
Yes.
unfortunately. And it is moving. The doors are opening up. There's a lot more talking about, but it's very siloed. One department does not necessarily talk to the other, and sometimes decisions can be made without the input of other
Oh no, it's
departments
amazing.
within.
That was one of the first things I learned when we did a huge weather summit in Washington D.C. in 2013, and it was all centered around getting the helicopter EMS weather tool out of R&D to a fully funded product. The folks at the National Center of Atmospheric Research created this wonderful tool in lightning speed in 6 months after we had a big summit in Boulder, Colorado. They came up with this and say, here, take a look at this. We're like, this is better than sliced bread. But it stayed on life support under the National Center of Atmospheric Research for until 2013. And finally, myself and several of the people at INCAR started, why can't we move this forward? And that was where we learned that you talk about the silo piece. We had a meeting in Washington, D.C. We took a year. We identified all the right players that had to be at the table because no one person can say yes in the FAA. You got to get all of them on board. And I understand that. However, the best conversation was one of our good friends came up to myself and my running partner at the time for that was Tom Judge, who was director for Maine MedFlight, their air medical program there in the state of Maine. His good friend, FAA guy, works in the DC office, and he was all giddy. He's like, "Hey, that conversation I just had with so and so was worth the price of admission." And we're kind of looking at him like, "What are you talking about?" I says, "Well, I spent 10 minutes with him, and I had this conversation. We cleared up 2 years worth of issues in 10 minutes." And we're kind of
There you
like,
go.
"Yeah, but you work in the same building, one floor off from each other." And I'll never forget, he looked me right dead in the eye and says, "Rex, you don't understand. I can't have that discussion there. I can here." I was like,
Hence the importance of all these people, all these agencies coming to the events and
I know. It's
talking
like
where we can actually put our heads together.
we always, Tom and I would say, our job is cruise directors to set up a safe space for government officials to be able to talk freely without
Oh my
worry of
gosh.
being impugned. I said,
Yeah,
that's our job. That's what we're going to
where
do.
where does that stem from? This I don't even know what you want to call it, this privacy siloing
I
of the
don't know. It's
departments?
I
I
always
mean,
say it's like government. It's a certain government agency put the SI in silo. It's amazing to me
yeah,
that they ever get anything
yeah,
done. And there's
yeah.
competition between divisions. There's also
Understandably so, but there's also moving forward for the greater
well
good
that
of the country
there's a
too.
huge amount of control. I think there's
Yeah.
certain individuals, not everybody, but certain individuals
Yeah.
that no, you can't go talk to him about that. That's ours. And then that's why we see a waste of federal funds because now I have three different divisions working on the exact same thing in parallel, and they
Yep.
don't know that each other exists or each other's doing the same thing. So yeah, we've seen a
Yep.
lot of that.
That's that. And we see that, by the way, not just here. I mean, it's everywhere, all around the world. It's part
Mm-hmm.
of the human nature or part of the beast, as they like to say in our case.
But so hopefully, again, 2026, we'll see an improvement in that. And I would tell
Yeah,
anybody in the government that if you're interested in participating with the Vertical Flight Society, with VAI, with NASAO, GAMA, any of those groups, hey, call me.
talk.
I'll make the introduction. I work with
Yes,
all of
make
them.
the introduction. Hey, you know what? Come and talk on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you guys. You
Oh, yeah.
said you wanted to, right? Okay, let's do it. Come
Well,
on, guys. Don't be
and
shy.
you and I both understand that there are certain things they're not allowed to talk about. That's why we set up
Absolutely.
the private meetings at
Yes,
these forums that we have, these workshops that we put on.
exactly.
We want them there because I can come up with a lot of great ideas, but I
I,
need their feedback. It's like, yeah, we can do
I,
that, but it's going to cost, $2 billion. So it's like, okay, what's
yes,
our
and
alternative here?
no, no,
It was
sorry about
like,
that.
I
And
remember one
also,
guy goes, yeah, we can do that, even though it is illegal, but we can do that.
we can do that. We can do that. And also, I think you and I have the track record to prove that we're not going to talk about those things online. We're not going to divulge any of
Well,
these
and
things.
a lot of times we'll set it up so it's an invite only. We
Yep,
don't
exactly.
there's certain meetings that we don't
Yes.
allow media to attend.
No,
And
nope,
we don't
nope, nope.
record anything on video or tape. We do take notes, but we understand there's a certain level of privacy, there's a certain level of confidentiality that we have to maintain.
That's important. That's important. That's important. I think you said it really well. 2025 might not have been as flashy as the previous years where we looked
Mm-hmm.
at the aircraft and we looked at all of this stuff. But somebody said, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else I was talking to, they were saying, actually a lot happened, but it was under the public radar, especially when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to infrastructure. It was in the details, it was in the policy writing, it was in all of these things. And it's true that when you tell people that there's something new in BV loss, a lot of people will go BV what now, huh? So you have to
Yeah,
explain
no, I
what
know.
that
Yeah.
is. So I think a lot of things did happen, but it's interesting to see what 2026 is going to be because it really is a crucial year. Also, a lot of companies said that they would be flying by this year. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, they're muddying the message here. It's not necessarily taking you and me on flights, although wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah,
But not commercially, right? We're
right.
not going to pay for
No,
it.
we're going to
It's
let you fly
prototype. It's
experimentally and yeah, from point A to point
experimental
B, and that's it.
prototypes.
So which yeah,
Congressionally, you
you
got
got
your airworthiness.
and I get it. I
Fine.
mean, it's a challenge to get an aircraft certified. There's so many hoops to jump through and so much bureaucracy to deal with. It's mind numbing. I'm glad I don't live in that space.
But having said that, you can definitely accuse me of having been a cheerleader in the past and everything. But this past year, I decided to let's be a little bit more serious here, and I did talk on my last big conference to let's use the right words and stop telling people that you're going to be
Mm.
certified by next year because yeah, you're going to be certified, but tell what kind of certification we're talking about. It's not operational certification. It's not commercial certification. Okay. And stop confusing people because they come to us and they're saying, "Well, I love this company because we're going to be flying this year." Well, it's like, yes, I like this company a lot. No, we're not going to be flying this year. You are not going to be flying this year. I might be lucky to get invited in a test flight, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So I think it is time for these companies to also step up right now. It's mature enough. We don't need to hyperboles they're no longer needed at this stage. We need pragmatic reality, and
Mm.
especially in the infrastructure side of things. So, which
Well,
is
and
why
I
we
think
have these podcasts with you.
the challenge we run into, and this the saying we had in EMS as a helicopter pilot flying air ambulances, the question would come up is like, well, how long does it take for you to get off the ground? Meaning, can you go faster? And my response as a manager would be, it takes as long as it takes. Because if I put a number to it, now I've got a new pilot coming in. He's trying to achieve something he shouldn't be trying to achieve. So if it takes 6 minutes today, it may take 10 minutes tomorrow, it may take 12 minutes the day after. Every situation, every scenario, every pilot's different. So when we look at certification, well, how long is it going to take to get certified? It takes as long as it takes until you do it right and it's safe, period.
Yeah. It depends on your target. Are you thinking about money? Then that's one thing. Are you thinking about saving human lives? That's another thing. So you have to figure out your priorities first before you ask that question. And then you will not ask that question once you do that. That's true. That's exactly it. Well, Rex, I want to thank you for being on this Kick of the Year 2026
No,
podcast
appreciate
where
being
we
your
can
first guest. Thanks for the honor. Thank you very much.
absolutely, absolutely. It was really good, and it's good to kind of give people a sense of what's happening. That a lot of things are happening. It might not be flashy headlights right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it is headlines, but it is happening, and things are moving forward, and we're excited to, well, to have a little bit of a part in all of this, in this once in a lifetime revolution, as they like to say it. And it's not trite to say that, I think. So
Yeah.
for all of you who are watching us, let us know what you think. If you are involved in the industry, please share your comments. Tell us what you think is happening, should be happening. And again, please like, share, and subscribe. Maybe somebody around you would like to know a little bit more about what's happening in advanced air mobility. And so once again, thanks, Rex, for being with us. And
well, and if anybody, any of your listeners are out there at Transformative Vertical Flight in San Jose,
yes,
into
yes,
January, Vertical
yes,
Aviation International in March, or Oshkosh, or
Verticon,
EAA, or not EAA, Oshkosh in July, or AIAA in May, or Forum, VFS Forum
yes.
in May, look for the hat. I'll be at all of them.
Welcome, yeah, welcome for a good conversation and after hours fun, I should say.
Amen.
Thanks, Rex.
Have a good one.